Welcome to our Watch and Learn. I'm Kelly Ashton, studio educator, and I'm here with Johnny Barfus. And we are going to tell you today all about the Little Buddy system that goes on the Little Foot frame. If you add a Little Buddy system to your Little Foot frame, it makes it so versatile because you can use both types of loading systems. So I'll turn it over to Johnny, and he's going to tell you all about it.
Okay, let's show you what the Little Buddy actually is. So it adds two poles to your Little Foot frame. We already had this piece right there. Let's see if Kayla can zoom in there. This part, this vertical part, was already part of the Little Foot design, and it was put on there by our engineers for a future use, possibly. So we turned that into holding this Little Buddy system. So it adds this top pole here. You can see that pole there. And then it adds this pole down here. So this connection, can you zoom out a little bit there? So it adds this connection here and this pole. So it adds basically two poles to your frame, making it, well, it's a three-pole system, we call it, because we're going to utilize three of these poles. We also get the question, can I still use my Little Foot frame if I add the Little Buddy? Yes, you can. As in, you can use it to do big quilts larger than what can fit on this frame, on the Little Buddy frame. The Little Buddy frame system was designed to basically just hold this width of fabric. So it's about 4.5 feet. I think we figured
48 inches.
48 inches of usable quilt space. So it wasn't designed to do things bigger than that. Great for baby quilts, great for our quilters, but not designed for a queen or king size quilt.
Right.
And you can still do that with the Little Foot frame system.
So you're saying when you add the Little Buddy system, it doesn't mean that you can no longer use the hooping method. You still can put big quilts on your Little Foot frame.
Exactly.
It just gives you the option to do a small one, rolling it up on the bars, or a big one loading it around the hoops. So.
Exactly. Thank you.
Awesome.
Okay, so we didn't put the leaders on here quite yet, and I'm just going to show you how I like to do that. So we're going to measure this pole, and this pole is 67 inches. We did the math already. Half of 67 is 33.5. So I'm going to measure. Do you mind holding that for me again that you did such a good job of? I have my Sharpie. I'm going to just do a little tick mark just by the Velcro at 33.5. Thank you. And then let's do that again on this one. It's so nice to have a quilting assistant. Again, I'm just going to do a little tick mark. Perfect. Then I'm going to fold my leaders in half. And I'm going to do a tick mark at both spots. So I fold it in half. I'm just going to do a little tick mark there. And then again on the other side. So I can keep that Velcro nice and straight and even. And I'm going to do on this one as well. Thank you for...
We're just marking the centers of the leaders so they can match up with the center marks on the poles, right?
Yes. And what?
And?
The center mark of my backing.
Oh, perfect. That's a good tip if you want to have a square quilt, huh?
If you do. I kind of like to. I usually like to have a square quilt.
Yeah.
It certainly doesn't happen very often in piecing, but you know, I'm learning. Okay, now I have a tick here and I have a tick there, a little marking on my pole. This one I'm going to line up in the center there, and I'm going to have this Velcro this way. We've added the Velcro already on there, and the fabric is going to go down underneath this pole.
So the leader is falling to the back.
Yes, the leader, we'll say water falling to the back.
Okay.
Because we've used that term in previous videos that people might have seen. And then we're going to do the same thing.
Was that your dancing video?
I did I did a little dance.
Okay.
And so Kayla, you can show on this one here, same thing. We want this to waterfall to the back as well. And we'll show you the reason why in a moment. So again, I'm just loading the center up with the center on the pole. You can see that, right? So now I'm ready to load the backing of my quilt. And my assistant Kelly has that for me.
Oh, I do. This was my job.
It's so great to have a quilter's assistant, you guys.
There you go.
Okay, thank you. So this is just a square quilt, right?
It's square.
It is square. So I'm going to load the leader, the selvage. No reason particularly why, just because I am. And this is the backing, and I'm just going to make a little snip there in the center. Boop. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. Make a little snip in the center. Now why am I doing that? So I can find the center easily when I go to pin it on. And it's just a 1/4 inch big.
So that's why you made the little center mark on your leader on both sides of the leader. One so the center is attached to the pole, and the other so you can find the center to match your quilt.
Exactly. I've got my pins here on top of the machine, and I'm just going to pin there.
Okay, while Johnny is pinning the quilt back to the leader, we're going to take a little break and pop over to Christina, and she's going to show us the ruler of the month that we're talking about for number 8, and it's the Concave Curves.
Let me tell you about the Concave Curve ruler. This one is super fun because it has 3 different arcs. It also has a straight edge up here at the top, and so it's super, super fun because you can fit it in just random places because it's got all of those different arcs, so you can make it work in fun ways. So let me show you what I've done with that. Let's look down here. I have this border here, and I went ahead and I did some spacing marks. So I used my handy pencil and marked just whatever I needed to make it fit that length. And now what I'm going to do is use the curve. Actually, I used this curve on this one. And I'm going to put my hopping foot right here so my needle is on the seam. Line the ruler up against my hopping foot. And then up here at the top, I'm going to make sure that I have this top part rotated so it's a 1/4 inch away from where I want to hit. So that gives me room for the needle and the hopping foot spacing. So as I'm stitching along, the hopping foot's rubbing up against that ruler foot, or up against the ruler, but the needle is going to be a 1/4 inch away from the ruler. So that way I can stop right here, and then I'm going to change the position. And you're going to notice that it's kind of a little awkward how you're going to hold the ruler. So you got to kind of play with it and see what works for you. So this side now is bumped up against my ruler foot, or my sure foot. This side is going to be a 1/4 inch away from my marked line of where I want to hit. And then I'm going to stitch around. Same thing. Lining it up, stitch up to my mark, stitch around to the next mark. And then this one, I added a little bit extra to it. So I took my ruler and lined the edge of the ruler up right on my stitch line. And I did another one, 1/4 inch away, stopped at my mark, flipped the ruler around, lined it up with my previous stitch line, and stitched down. And it gives you that 1/4 inch channel there. Okay? Over here we embellished it a little bit, filled in this area with some feathers, did some diagonal lines on the side. So those possibilities are endless. This next section, I used the other 2 arcs. So I used this arc, and what I did was I picked a grid line on here, lined that grid up with my seam, and then I did the stitching along here, shifting it over, again using the same mark on that grid, lined up on my seam, and stitched the next one. Going all the way across till I got to the end here. Now for this part, I'm going to use this bottom arc. And I've had some lines already drawn on here. So I lined the ruler up. And I highly recommend using different marking tools. Experiment with them and find out what you're comfortable with, because they really can help you with your ruler work. Okay, back to this arc. I'm going to stitch down, and then I'm going to flip the ruler to the other side and stitch up, and then I backtracked because I wanted to end down here. If you notice, before I had the ruler underneath on this side, now it's going to be up kind of behind my foot. I'm going to stitch over and then stitch up and down, over, up and down. So this is a continuous curve, but it's using two different arcs, so it's more elongated rather than perfect squares. So something fun to do. This right here shows you the difference in arcs. So the deeper arc here, and then this more shallow one. So you can play by flipping them back and forth. I'm going to now bring up my bobbin thread here. Okay, I've got a purple line along here. I'm going to call that my seam. When you're holding the ruler, I recommend not being right on the edge of the ruler. Find one of these grid lines to put on the seam. Otherwise, you run the risk of bumping off of this edge here. So for this one, I'm going to use the first line that's on there. Okay. Notice that I have to hold the ruler in kind of an awkward position. You'll get used to that. We call it being contortionist. Hug up against the ruler. And then I'm going to stop when I get to my seam or my marked line. And I'm going to shift it over. I'm using that same mark on my ruler to line up and stitch around. Okay, we can do the same thing. This one's a little bit trickier because you want to be really careful that you don't pop off those edges. So just make sure that you've got enough room so that you are able to stitch that part. Okay, and then we'll show you this last side here. And again, I'm going to line up with my second line just to be consistent. Okay, so you can kind of see there the different angles that you can stitch out, different lengths, and you can adjust where you position it to make it fit right in wherever you're needing to quilt. So, the Concave Curves template, have fun with it.
So I loaded the top of the backing to the leader first, and I'm going to I'm going to pin the bottom of the backing to this leader, and you can do it in either order. So I made my little mark. I've got my snip mark there, and I'm just going to pin the backing now, the bottom of the backing to this leader. And want to remember, I want to come behind, I want to come behind this pole, so coming back down below and behind this pole here, and above this pole here. So if you could zoom out just a little bit more there, Kayla. Okay, so I want to go behind this pole here and over the top of this pole here, so that when I pull it tight, I'll have a nice flat surface. So when I'm pinning, I like to grab a big chunk, a big bite with that pin, and make sure I keep the pins the same, even all the way across, and taking the same amount as I go. I try to do about a 1/4 inch because, again, as quilters, we kind of know what a 1/4 inch looks like. Okay, now I've got my bottom of my backing attached to this leader. I'm just going to roll this one this way. I'm going to pull it up. And let's point out something as well while we're right here, Kayla. Could you back up and show this, the pole keepers? So these pole keepers, I'm going to come around here. They're kind of hard to get on and off. But what those do, let's see if we can get a good shot. Yeah, there we go. So these are called pole keepers. They're two black circles, and they're meant for the front of this pole here. They keep this pole from flopping out like this when you're tightening your quilt. And you can still turn that pole with them in there. And we put our ratchet stop down so the pole will only run direction, but they will still roll with those pole keepers in there. I think that's important to remember. Okay. So now I'm going to roll this backing onto that pole. I'm going to loosen this side clamp here so I can go back to where I pin on the top of the back, like so. Then I'm going to do my batting, and I'm just going to place this over the top. That's where I could do my basting stitch along that top edge to have a plumb line. And for time's sake, we're just going to lay this down here. This is an adorable baby quilt that Kim made with some of her leftover blocks from a pattern she designed. I'm going to lay that on there like that. But I have one more thing at my disposal. We have the super clamp that comes with your Little Buddy system. I can just put that on there on the front, turn it like we showed earlier, and I've got a nice flat surface to quilt there. All right, that is, and then I'm ready to, we put a clamp on there. Let's grab that off. So then I can use that Little Buddy system with my little foot frame. I do the stitching on this row here. I can baste along there, baste down the sides, stitch out this first row, and then just advance it like we've shown. Make sure your pulls are down and just advance it like that. Any questions?
I think that's fantastic. Thanks for telling us all about the Little Buddy system on the little foot frame, Johnny.
You're welcome.
I love that by adding the simple 2 poles to your frame system, the Little Buddy, then you have 2 options, 2 ways to load a quilt. So
Yeah.
Before we go, we need to talk about the quilt that's behind Johnny on the wall. So this was a vintage quilt top given to one of our national educators, Lana Russell. And she's from Washington State. And she quilted it, looks like with a Pro Stitcher design, possibly some ruler work. I'm not sure if she used rulers in the continuous curve. It looks like it. But we love the vintage quilts that our educators have quilted, and we're excited to have a chance to share them with you. So
Yeah.
she did a fabulous job. So
Beautiful
thank you,
quilt.
Lana. All right, thank you for joining us for our Watch and Learn today. So join us again next week. And give us a thumbs up, give us a like, and you can even subscribe to our YouTube channel. So have some fun quilting.